Good morning. My name is Marcio Thompson. I am the External Relations Manager for the Get Ready program with the Office of Higher Education. I want to thank you all for taking this opportunity to join us on our public engagement call. The purpose of the call is so the Office of Higher Education can engage with diverse communities to identify areas in post-secondary education. We want to work collaboratively with communities to provide equitable access to information and advice that leads to the pursuit of post-secondary education credential for all Minnesotans. Today's topic for the call is getting ready for fall school opening. And we do have a few hot-button topics that we'll address as well. Today, this morning on the call, as presenters, we have Dennis Olson, who is the Commissioner of the Office of Higher Education. We have Cynthia Kenyan, who is the Epidemiologist for the Minnesota Department of Health. We have Paul Shepard, Dr. Paul Shepard, who is the Assistant Director for Student Development with Minnesota State. And then we have Burnham with the Minnesota Department of Education. Once again, the format for the call, you'll hear each person speak on specific topics. I'll introduce the topic as we begin, and each person will state their name before they begin to talk. So with that being said, let's go ahead and then let Commissioner Dennis Olson give an update on any executive branch executive orders or any information he needs to give us from that perspective. Thanks, Dennis, for joining us on the call today.
Good morning, Marcio, and good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I just want to extend appreciation that Marcio gave for our attendees and all of our panelists today. We really appreciate the opportunity to address you on these weekly public engagement calls. This is a somewhat new initiative for us, but things have been going well thus far, and the questions and feedback we've received have been incredibly positive. So I just appreciate those of you that have joined us over the last few weeks, as well as those that may be calling in for the first time. Feel free to develop any questions you may have and send them along, and if we're not able to address them during the time we have today, I'll certainly commit to getting back to you at an appropriate time, along with the recording that's sent out following the call. So thanks, everybody, for joining us today. We continually receive questions around the uncertainty of the future of state budgets. We received some questions from the last couple of calls regarding the impact or potential impact on higher ed of the state budget shortfall. And this is a question that I know will continually come up. And I want to make sure, first of all, make a commitment to make sure we continue to address it on all the future calls as we continue to learn more about the budget outlook for the state, for higher ed as an overall sector, and for the Office of Higher Education programs specifically. Right now, we know it's been reported that the state could potentially be faced with a $4.7 billion budget shortfall. The real next opportunity that we'll have to take a look at the state's budget picture is the November forecast that's put out by Minnesota Management and Budget, and we know that Minnesota Management and Budget has actually been working to provide additional feedback and additional analysis of the state's budget as we enter bond sales for GAO bonds, and we will continue to have to put budget pictures and budget projections together. But the next real opportunity is the November forecast, and that'll help set the table for the state's outlook. So, at this particular time, no budget reductions for any specific agency or sector have been forecasted at this point. We do, however, know that, of course, many colleges are already looking to the future and are facing current declining enrollments, which leads to an obvious reduction in revenue and anticipated revenue. And of course, we know that colleges and campuses are also faced with increased costs and hardships due to COVID. The executive branch really has to maintain a balanced budget. The legislature has the job of making decisions on appropriations, and really at this point, it's just a little too early to know if there will be cuts or maintenance of current budget levels, or, if any cuts will really be significant. And we really don't yet know how they will impact campuses and systems and programs that the Office of Higher Education administers, like the state grant program, which supports over 80,000 Minnesota students. And so, it is just too early, but I can, for those on the call, make a commitment to continue to talk about the state's budget outlook and its impact on higher ed and the Office of Higher Ed as we continue to learn more. Another question I was asked to address is around the current executive branch response related to higher education. On a call a couple of weeks ago, I had outlined some provisions in Executive Order 20-74, and that's the current executive order that we operate under, which has some provisions specific to higher ed. One of those provisions is actually to limit in-person classes to no more than 25 people. There are some additional provisions in there around requirements for higher ed institutions that they continue to the best extent possible, provide distance learning options, and that there's really requirements in there for higher ed institutions to have a higher ed COVID-19 preparedness plan. And there's some specific required content that each higher ed plan must provide. First, it is that distance learning whenever possible piece. It's to ensure that sick students and institution staff and instructors stay home if and when they are sick. A requirement around social distancing, and a requirement around cleaning and disinfection protocols. Those plans all have to be certified and signed at the campus level. They have to be disseminated and posted, and there is some training required as well. We do know that almost all of our campuses, and certainly our two large public systems, have implemented a masking policy that is consistent with or actually exceeds the requirements of the statewide masking policy implemented a couple of weeks ago. And so, institutions are required to ensure that those policies are being adhered to, and really all of the executive orders have the full effect of law. And so there are specific provisions in the executive orders related to enforcement and penalties for noncompliance with executive order mandates. And so at this moment, we are living under the requirements outlined in Executive Order 20-74. I will, just for folks on this call, let you know that we are working closely with Minnesota Department of Health and with our systems and campuses and colleges to look at a potential expansion of in-person classes. We know that classes are starting here for some next week, for others the following week. We do know there's an accelerated timeline for some of our campuses to start classes, and so we want to make sure that we have the appropriate flexibility for them to be successful, as well as maintain students, staff, and faculty safety, and keeping central the need to ensure public health and appropriate measures. So we're working on that currently, and hope to have that in place here sometime soon, but I don't have a specific timeline. And so those are the two questions. If there are any more for me that pop up, please feel free to either enter them in the chat. And like I said, if we can't get to them during the call, during the time we have today, we will be sure to get back with you with appropriate answers. We really appreciate everyone on the call today, and thank you for your time.
Hey, thanks so much, Dennis, for that update. Do want to reiterate that the chat box is open for any of the attendees who want to drop a question in the chat. We may not be able to address all of the questions at this time. However, what we'll do and what we've been doing on previous calls is taking those questions back to our committee and making those part of a larger call, or being able to address those with one of the panelists and send an answer out to that question to all the panelists when we send out the update and recording. So we appreciate you. If you have any questions, just drop in the chat. Thanks a lot, Dennis, for reiterating that. Next on the call, we'll have Cynthia Kenyan, who will speak about the guidance from the NDH, Minnesota Department of Health, for campuses for returning to school for fall. So thanks a lot, Cynthia, for jumping on the call with us today.
Thank you for having me. So, again, my name is Cynthia Kenyan. I'm an epidemiologist with the Minnesota Department of Health, and my normal day job is I supervise the vaccine preventable disease surveillance unit. So I bring a lot of kind of infectious disease background into this role. And for COVID-19, I have been the liaison for higher education, so I have had a great pleasure getting to know a lot of the different institutions across the state and working closely with the Office of Higher Education. So thank you again for having me. Just a couple of updates I'd like to give you is that several colleges and universities are resuming in the next couple of weeks, as Commissioner Olson said. And really one of the things we're really trying to encourage when it comes to students is they really should start now with their own personal kind of mini stay-at-home order. And that means reducing the number of individuals they hang out with to pretty much just their immediate household. And if they do spend time with others, because I know, students and want to see, your friends before you go off to college, but if you do this, it really should be limited to just a few people and make sure you're following our social distancing recommendations and even masking as needed. Definitely should not be going out, visiting bars, going to larger social gatherings, or any other situation that will put you at risk of contracting COVID-19. And that's partly just, for your own health, but then also what you're going to or not bring to campus. Campuses have worked really hard to try to help minimize spread of COVID-19 on campus, but students are a big part of making that a success. And really not taking that seriously does jeopardize the experience this fall. That's just a point that we're really trying to promote right now, and then you'll see us doing that in collaboration with the Office of Higher Education, both as we enter returning to fall, but then even ongoing throughout the fall. I did receive some questions ahead of time around what kind of is on individuals' minds, and Commissioner Olson did cover some of this as far as, requirements that every campus has to have, and there are two plans that every campus has to have, and one is the college or university as an employer, and then the other as an institute of higher education. So the requirements that Commissioner Olson outlined are ones that they do need to follow, and then there are also requirements within higher education guidance that they also need to follow, and really one of that is maintaining at least 6 feet between people to the extent possible in the higher education setting. Now, we do know that in some classroom settings that is difficult to not possible, and so in that situation they need to put into place other mitigating pieces to help reduce transmission. They were required to develop plans that address returning to campus, the testing needs, contact tracing, isolation, and quarantine as appropriate, and also to provide accommodations for high-risk and vulnerable populations. So those are all in that guidance, and all of you can access the higher education guidance on, I believe it's linked on OHE's website, but then also it is housed on the Minnesota Department of Health's website, and there's a specific tab for higher education that you can all access, and I'll make sure that link gets out with you as well. As far as another question I got, is there a mandatory review of the campus preparedness plans? No, but they all do have to have one, and certainly MDH and OHE are here to provide any technical assistance campus does have, and I can tell you that many of them have reached out to us to ask us clarifying questions and are definitely engaged in trying to do this the right way. And then are there testing mandates or guidance for testing mandates? So in the higher education guidance that we do have available on MDH's website, it does outline where we promote testing and where we do not. So there are specific guidances around testing symptomatic individuals and being able to do that, or at least letting your student staff where they can get it, so working with them to do that. But then, so the testing is focused on those who are symptomatic and in the close contacts of those individuals who are positive for COVID-19. So those are the two situations where we really recommend testing as a state, and then also even further for higher education. In some instances, if we see a cluster in a confined space, we might do slightly broader testing in that situation. But those really are the areas where we would recommend testing. At this time, MDH is not recommending kind of this broad-based testing to come back to the campus. There are some institutions throughout the country that are doing that. However, it's not a well-studied approach, and the other issue with that kind of testing is that it only gives you a snapshot or a moment in time. So you could be negative with that test in the morning, but easily positive either later that day or the next day. When you think of once you've been exposed to COVID-19, it can take anywhere from 2 to 14 days to develop symptoms. Just taking one day at one time isn't going to give you that reassurance that you don't have COVID. It might feel that way, but that's not what that test is doing. So what's really important is that students, faculty, and staff are all very aware of their health, and if they develop any symptoms of COVID-19, that they reach out to their provider and see if they need to be tested. And then from that, definitely working when local public health or MDH calls to follow up with the case, working with us to identify your contacts so we can let your contacts know so they can do the right thing and also get tested themselves. So I think that approach is a very effective one as far as trying to find cases and getting in front of it. But ultimately, the end goal for all of us, regardless of whatever strategy is that a college or university takes, is for us to reduce transmission on campus. So reduce those opportunities for there to be spread on campus. There will be cases on campus this fall, especially for ones that are returning to any sort of in-person classes or having people on campus themselves, even if the classes are online. So we are going to see cases. We will see clusters, and we'll likely see some outbreaks. But what is the most important piece in preventing transmission is actually not testing. It is the social distancing, that 6-foot social distancing that is so important, and then the masking piece. Because really, if you are 6 feet or greater from an individual, we wouldn't consider that an exposure. So you don't need to be quarantined. And your likelihood of getting COVID-19 in that situation is incredibly low. So that's the piece that's so important and that really is going to slow down COVID on campus. And that's one of the reasons we're pushing so hard to have campuses set up their operations that way, but also try to get students, staff, and faculty to understand the importance of that social distancing. Because ultimately that's our main tool. Another question I got was, are there exceptions to the face mask executive order for campuses? And yes, there are some. So we definitely have language around if an individual, for whatever reason, can't wear a facial covering, there's language to promote maybe the use of a face shield, or even if that's not possible, there are other ways to work around that. And then there are certain situations where we also allow the use of a face shield instead of a face covering, or allow folks to take it off altogether. But that's a very limited group that we allow that because, again, that face covering seems to really help bring down the overall transmissibility in situations. So it's an important tool, and we need to utilize it. And then the other question I got is, is there any guidance for campus outbreaks that would warrant a transition to distance learning only? And we are in the process of finalizing some different steps that institutions can take depending on what kind of activity they're seeing in the community, on campus, and just other resources that are available. So it's very much a multi-layered decision-making approach where you have to take a lot of different things into account to see what campus operation changes you need to do at what time. We're in the process of kind of finalizing that guidance, and we hope to have it out by the end of this week. And that will definitely walk you through as far as when would we really encourage a campus to completely go to distance learning only versus maybe just powering down certain activities on campus to see if we can get in front of the activity. So that is what I have. I do want to let you know that colleges and universities are meeting with NDH every week on a weekly call to try to discuss their concerns and bring to light any issues they're having so that we can troubleshoot together. And again, they're all working very hard to bring students back to a learning environment as much as they can this fall. But ultimately, it is now in the hands of the students.
Thank you so much, Cynthia. That was really great information. Definitely glad that we had you on the call to address some of those questions. We appreciate you lending your time and your voice to that. We did have a question in the chat that you might be able to address. I will say that it sounds like you gave some good advice earlier. So the question is around what advice do you have for parents and grandparents as they approach the new school year? And earlier you said something about encouraging students to start their own kind of personal quarantine. So kind of a mini quarantine, stay at home and kind of reducing their interaction outside of the house, outside of their immediate family. So I would say that for that person who has that question, that might be a great place to start. Would you think that there will be other things that you might offer as suggestions for parents and grandparents as we start approaching the new school year?
Yeah, as far as parents and grandparents, if you have this if the students currently living with you, partnering with us to stress the importance of them kind of doing this little mini stay-at-home order would be really helpful. There's still a lot of influence you might have in that, and just kind of explaining to them that they're responsible for their own health, and on some level your health too. If they're still at home and they're going to bars and restaurants, they're also there's a risk they're bringing home, but then also ultimately the health of the campus and helping promote an environment that will allow them to have the experience that they want to have as well.
Thanks so much, Cynthia, for addressing that. We appreciate that. So if there are any other questions, what we'll do is we'll make sure that we capture those. And as I said before, either we'll take those and address those in another call, or we'll try to capture those at the end. And then we can also get answers from panelists and then send them out in our follow-up email out to all the attendees. So definitely appreciate your time and your insight. That was sharing great information. So glad that we had you on the call today. So appreciate your time.
No problem.
We'll move on to Burnham, who is with us from the Minnesota Department of Education. Bonnie, can you hear me, Bonnie?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. So this is Bobbie Burnham. I'm with the Minnesota Department of Education. I serve as the Assistant Commissioner over the Office of Teaching and Learning. And I'm here today just to share with you some learnings and some feedback we have around transitioning students into post-secondary and some of the impacts that COVID has had on that. And, you know, I think the biggest topic of conversation over the past 4 to 6 months is around grading. And some of you may know that MDE was very comprehensive and intentional around developing their grading guidance last spring when we were in distance learning, just knowing that the multi-levels of impact different grading policies could have on seniors transitioning into post-secondary. And so we worked with multiple stakeholders around our grading practices and really focused on equity and worked with all the equity leaders around the states within districts. We worked closely with the P20 committee, and there were still multiple consequences of grading policy given that it's a local decision, and we really strongly encourage school districts and school boards to bring in parents and students and to hear from them as they were adapting their grading policies to distance learning. So what I've done here for today's conversation is reached out to a couple of my directors. One is Jennifer Dugan, who oversees the assessment division, and the other is Paula Palmer, who oversees the college and career readiness. So I'm just going to give you some of the feedback and some of what we've been hearing. And like I said, most of it is around grading guidance. So the spring grading policies from letter grading to pass, fail, or pass, no credit have really had an impact on college entrance requirements and at some college as well as scholarship requirements. I received multiple calls from just distraught parents around some of the grading policies and how it was impacting scholarship possibilities. And so moving forward, we really have been trying to work with school districts and school boards to be really equitable and to take those circumstances into consideration. A bit more context related to the impact of grading and GPA. So while many higher education institutions no longer are requiring a college entrance exam, students that want to attend must have a higher GPA. So Jennifer gave me an example from Winona State around some of the language that they're currently have. If you have not taken the ACT or SAT due to COVID-19 restrictions, Winona State University has instituted flexible acceptance criteria until further notice. That being a 3.0 GPA or higher without an ACT or SAT, or 50% of class rank, or a 2.75 GPA or higher with the ACT, SAT of 21 or higher. So I'm sure Winona State's not the only in-state institution having flexible grading like that. That we really were glad to see that. Jennifer Dugan has heard that many of the ACT testing sites have canceled, and getting registered for summer administrations was very difficult, just given the fluidity of the COVID and the health restrictions. There is a fall district testing option that many districts are using for the 2021 seniors that were unable to test during their junior year. But this administration will continue to be dependent on the health considerations and whether school buildings are open. And for some of the feedback I received from the College and Career Readiness Division, for some students, loss of learning or credit incompletion impacted eligibility for graduation and or post-secondary enrollment. Students needing to go to work to help families with additional income in economic challenges, and in some cases we've heard students were foregoing distance learning attendance to do so. Inequity access to technology or internet really affected disproportionately for students of color and low-income students, which again, as you know, impacted learning loss. And again, the implications of missing sports seasons or college sport team eligibility, had a huge impact. We have heard some positive impacts, which include innovative approaches to teaching and learning and engaging some students or motivating them to accelerate or achieve at higher levels or complete to graduation. So a few examples of those include the alternative programs in general ed. One example is allowing students to focus on 2 to 3 courses instead of maybe the 6 or 7 within their scheduled school day. Pre-assessing student knowledge of course standards or credit recovery courses, where students only focus on completing those that were not demonstrated. It can also be an original teacher designating or personalizing that for CR efforts. Flexible scheduling. Students have a range of times to connect on specific courses. Instead of 6 periods a day, students have 10 periods and then pick the 6 on teacher availability. And then teachers meeting with students for small groups, targeted possibly in parks or community areas within the neighborhoods, using analytics from the digital platform to coordinate on a map students struggling via concept skill or not logging in consistently. Around a few innovative approaches from family and consumer sciences, were teachers developing culinary video demonstrations on TikTok. Fashion and apparel courses have been directly involved, students directly involved in creating masks in their communities. And then around online learning, we've heard from parents who have really positive experiences with their students during the distance learning in the spring that saw learning gains and were seeking to enroll in full-time state-approved online learning programs as a result. And overall, distance learning has caused systems to reconsider assessment practices and student engagement strategies. Not all have been successful, but it's necessary at the moment. Schools have invested in flexibility in digital learning platforms, are thriving much better than those who have not. And as a system, it's caused us to really re-examine our funding model and has really shone a light on the importance of broadband connectivity. And as some of you may know, that most of the CARES Act federal COVID relief money, the governor has really prioritized connectivity and technology for those communities and who may not have access, as well as really recognizing the social and emotional mental health needs that distance learning and COVID has had on that as well. So that's the feedback I had from my team. I'm happy to take questions, and if I don't have a direct answer, I'd be glad to get back to you. So just want to thank you for the invite today and for the opportunity to share with you.
Bobbie, thanks so much for the information. It seems as though there's a multifaceted approach to trying to make sure that we give students the best opportunity to be successful from the K-12 perspective, and I appreciate you providing that insight from your team. I didn't see any, well, I think there was one question in the chat, and it was about maybe assessing students grading during this time, and I think you kind of addressed that. Someone offered up an NPR link to an NPR discussion that also had information about that, and we'll make sure that we clip that in our email when we send that out. And if the information that you were speaking from is from a kind of an FAQ or anything like that, we'll try to make sure we capture that information as well and put that in our follow-up email, put a link to that in our follow-up email to our attendees. But thank you so much for that information. I think it was just absolutely valuable information for parents and students to hear. So hopefully we can get that shared out broadly. All right. Next on the call, we have Paul Shepard from Minnesota State. He's going to talk about strategies for ensuring success for students in the wake of COVID-19. Go ahead, Paul.
All right, Marcio, thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. I really appreciate the opportunity to join the call this morning. Again, just to provide a little bit more information about my role within Minnesota State, I work in our Academic and Student Affairs Division, specifically working with the entities on our 37 different colleges and universities that work specifically with student support initiatives, student development initiatives, and student success. So again, really happy to share a little bit about the work that we've been doing to ensure student success in the wake of COVID-19. I wanted to start by just sharing that briefly that before the outbreak of the pandemic, we were talking about ways in which we could support students at a distance, knowing more students may be accessing higher education online, and thinking about how some of the programs and services and initiatives offered by units in student affairs, student services could help support students in that instance. And it seems like everything that we discussed there in terms of kind of moving in that particular direction, once the pandemic broke out, we implemented almost everything that we talked about in a really short period of time. So it's, I think, really helpful to, kind of think about ways in which we can better serve students, especially in these unprecedented times. So, a couple of things I guess wanted to share, was already mentioned on our campuses. There is a mix of online, hybrid, and high flex delivery, and also some in-person. Based on kind of our analysis, we're seeing that we're still mostly looking at online and hybrid or high flex courses, and of course anything that would happen in person would follow MDH guidelines as it relates to physical distancing and other guidance that's been received. In terms of how we're translating strategies to support student success, one of the things that we did initially, and I'm sure this is shared in a lot of different areas, is utilizing technology to really bring our community together and think about ways of engaging with students a little bit differently than maybe we have in the past. So one of the strategies that we implemented system-wide was the development of a student continuity team site where we added 35 different channels that really touched upon all different areas of student support areas, and just asked community members on our campuses, staff in these areas, to add in ideas, questions, thoughts, initiatives that they were implementing to better connect with students and address issues, and in a time where things were kind of happening very quickly. I was really excited to see that we had well over 750 individuals join that online community of practice and shared some really exciting strategies to better engage students. So a lot of that is using Teams, using Zoom, doing some kind of drop-in appointments via Teams or Zoom to keep academic advisors connected to students, sharing information through various channels, either through, again, Zoom, Teams, or email, or social media was another piece that, happened very frequently. Virtual town halls, I think just a variety of communication strategies that were implemented. And more of the, kind of access and, access side, admissions areas did a great job of transitioning to virtual visits and kind of working out ways in which they could create an engaging experience, showcasing our campuses to prospective students in a way, again, that maybe wasn't the same as if it were to be in person, but still an engaging experience that gave prospective students kind of a sense of what it would be like to attend a college or university. So also, since the pandemic broke out and continuing to this day, a lot of the professionals within different functional areas of student success, student development, and support are meeting frequently to talk through issues and share effective practices and ways to support students and reach out to students. I think it's really important to help students feel as though even though we've been at a distance here for a while, that they're still a part of the college and university community, and being able to offer engagement opportunities to keep that connection strong and offer the type of support that our students need to continue their education during this time is of course of critical importance and what has really drove a lot of these strategies. So, I think some other pieces that come to mind as it relates maybe more towards, the unique situation that we're in for fall 2020. As has been mentioned, we've talked about the mask order, and that's certainly something that has been, talked broadly about in our system in terms of the implementation of that. I think one of the things that's relatively, exciting to see, related to kind of how the implementation of the mask order is kind of coming to fruition is thinking about ways in which this can be a campus community development activity, thinking about ways in which we can reinforce the idea that we're all in this together. We're a community. We're here to, we all have a role in ensuring safety of everyone who's a member of this community. And so masks or face shields, other types of coverings, is a way that is a tangible way that we can go about doing that. And so from what we understand, there's a lot of initiatives like that underway that involve a variety of different areas on college and university campuses. So, of course, as was also mentioned as well, there's issues regarding, for individuals that may require accommodations for masks. That's certainly something that's been discussed quite a bit within our accessibility professionals, community of practice within our system, talking about ways in which we can help support students and work with students. So, I think as far as that's concerned, I think we just continue to try to keep those relationships strong with students, continue to think creatively about ways in which student support and student development initiatives, programs, and services are delivered, and continuing to try to make sure that students know where to go when they have questions or if they have concerns. I think one of the things that I feel like, would want to mention as it relates to this is thinking about our system work as it relates to helping students to secure their basic needs or helping to support students who are struggling with basic needs and security. And there's been a lot of creativity on our college and university campuses to keep food pantries open during this time, keeping them accessible, being able to offer resources that are available within the community and connecting, strategically with community organizations to continue to offer services related to basic needs. And so I think that's just another example of ways in which we've tried to be proactive to continue the basic needs support programs and initiatives that have already been implemented, but also being responsive to unique needs that are coming up through, our experiences with the pandemic. Technology access, I think, is a great example of something that isn't necessarily equitably distributed amongst all, and, thinking about ways in which we can support students who may not have enough devices in their home to do their work, or may not have the most reliable internet connection, and something that I've experienced today. So I think that's, some of the things that we continue to kind of work on, certainly on the academic side, the flexibility of being able to work with students to meet their unique needs is another piece that remains of paramount importance as time kind of rolls forward and in dealing with COVID-19. Another question that I was asked to respond to is, what should students do if they contract COVID-19 and are not able to complete the semester? One of the things that I wanted to mention is that our board policies and system procedures already address refunds and processes for students. I think, certainly most students aren't going to go to our policy and procedure website necessarily looked it out. So I think certainly our colleges and universities do a good job of communicating with students about what those processes look like. Typically, at most of our institutions, the business office would be the main point of contact for helping students kind of work through the process to request a refund of tuition and fees if they aren't able to continue. That decision-making occurs at our colleges and universities, but our system policies and procedures kind of outline ways in which that should be done and to ensure that there is a process that students could work through. Another question that I was asked to respond to is there an office or a checklist in place to help students to navigate such a process? I think, as I mentioned, the business office on the campus would probably be the most logical place to go. But I think one of the things that we've talked about kind of broadly throughout this time is that, you know, when students are trying to balance a whole host of responsibilities, both having to do with their academic pursuits but, you know, also family pursuits and employment and all other aspects of students' lives, we may not necessarily know exactly where to go. So again, I think that kind of addresses the importance of not only communicating proactively with students, which is something that's been a priority, but also looking at ways in which any area that would necessarily be connected to students could help to be good referral agents for students. So if a student is highly connected to their academic advisor, for example, even though questions related to refunds and some of those financial processes may not necessarily be in the purview of their academic advisor, but their academic advisor would know where to send students on campus and could help facilitate that connection. So I think we've really tried to focus on, you know, being student ready and wherever a student would go, wherever they feel a strong connection to be able to ask questions like this, we would be prepared to be able to send them to the appropriate place to get that taken care of. So, so I think during this time to ensure student success, we just try to reinforce the fact that our colleges and universities are a community. Health and safety is the #1 priority. We all have responsibility for that, and we'll continue to work together to ensure that students can continue along their path.
Thank you, Paul, for that information. Just one additional question I would ask. The student support services like you know, maybe the writing lab or you know, tutoring and things like that, are those still going to be functional supports for students during this time on your campuses?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Absolutely. I want to make sure to clarify that, you know, throughout this time, those resources have been available. There has been kind of a mix of some of those services being delivered in person, but also online as well. I think those are two student services areas that are great examples of using Zoom as a way to offer students an opportunity to drop in to open office hours within those areas to seek assistance, but also to set up individual appointments where students could meet with a tutor, for example, to address those concerns. So yes, those services and all the other services that kind of fall under this umbrella are open, and folks there have been really creative in being able to meet students kind of where they're at and help them address their needs.
Hey, thanks so much for that, Paul. We want to thank you so much for making yourself available to spend the time with us and share information that's very vital and important to what students and parents need to know about resources that are on campus and strategies that you guys are using to make sure that students continue to be successful. So definitely want to let you know we appreciate your time. Sorry about the internet issues as well, but we definitely thank you for joining us.
Well, it's absolutely my pleasure. The internet issues were all on my end, so so I appreciate your flexibility with me this morning. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, so we did have a brief technical issue, so this is Kat filling in for Marcio just at the end of the call here. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this public engagement call. We appreciate you, and we do want to remind you that we have another call next week on Wednesday, August 19th at 10 a.m. The topic will be the needs, challenges, and opportunities of immigrant, DACA, and international students in higher education. Again, this call will happen on Wednesday, August 19th at 10 a.m. And also, just a quick reminder, we do welcome any comments, concerns, questions about these calls, and you can contact us at public.engagement.ohe@state.mn.us. If you couldn't quite write that down, we will have it displayed at the end slide, the final few seconds of this video. So please go ahead and contact us, and we hope to see you next week. Thanks.